Hello and welcome to New Noizze, where you're going to hear my ramblings and thoughts on the newest releases from bands and artists, both signed and unsigned. This podcast is brought to you as part of the Noizze Podcast Network and sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. Luckily, the first one of these went well, so I'm back by maybe popular demand or maybe just the fact that I want to try and do well by our feature. Most of the bands I'm going to talk about today are in our New Noizze feature, which you can find on noizze.co.uk, and we usually drop that on Sunday evenings. So be sure to check that out if you want the full rundown of bands in addition to those that I mentioned today. There will be a link in the bio for that feature itself. And if that wasn't enough, every single band or artist that features in New Noizze is also on our Spotify Essential playlist. So be sure to check that out, and you can find us on Spotify at Noizze UK. Conveniently, the Noizze podcast is also on Spotify, so you could just switch, and after you've listened to this, jump straight into that playlist. Treat yourself. The podcast itself is on both Instagram and Twitter at Noizze Podcast Network, and you can find our main website and everything that happens there at Noizze UK on pretty much all social media websites. This podcast is available wherever you like to listen to your podcasts, whether that be on YouTube, on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere else that streams podcasts. You will hopefully find us there. All the bands that I talk about today will have a link in the bio, as well as links for the Essential playlist and New Noizze feature. And last but not least, be sure to write in with any suggestions, whether this be something to listen to, your thoughts on bands that I talk about, or even if you're a band or artist yourself that are looking for a feature, then get in touch. I love listening to new music. And would like to add anything I possibly can into this feature, and you can find me at Jack_Noizze at Twitter. So please do so. Please get in touch, whether that be through the podcast page or whether that be through my own page. Anyway, that's more than enough rambling from me, so let's get into it. I am proper stoked that the Nightmares are back. They are back in a big way as well. They have released their new single, From Above. It is the start of a new era for the band. They've always had this kind of gloomy, sort of gothic feel about them. They've always done a really good job at combining pop melodies and solid rock rhythm sections. They were a really underrated band, and it's really cool to see them come back and launch in a way that seems to be a pretty big deal. They've signed to Ven Records in the UK and Equal Vision Records in the US, and they have also hinted at the fact that they're going to be dropping an album soon, which I, for one, am stoked for. It just feels like they've nailed the aesthetic. It feels like they've really captured what the Nightmares are about. It feels fresh. It feels new. There's this combination of gothic rock fuzz that kind of collides with these amazing synths that sit behind the music. Between vocalists, there's an amazing playoff of melody and harmony, and it's really understated, but the chorus is also a big rock anthem banger. They've really nailed the sound. They've nailed the feel. They've come out of the gate swinging on this single, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what's going to come next and what they've got in store ready for the release. I'm just really stoked for it. It's really cool to have them back, and it's really cool to see them going at it in a really big way. So that is definitely one to keep your eye on. Next up is Cardiff-based band Half Happy. They are fresh out of the gates with their second single, Steal Me Away, that I covered last week, written by members Zach and Rose before the band came into existence, and the couple had started writing and recording in their living room. It was written 2 years ago with an accompanying video that was filmed a year ago itself, and it marks the early stages of the band and the idea and musical direction that was later turned into a full band project. The release comes a month after their debut single Love Sweep, which stylistically hit in a very similar way. It's a stunning blend, I wrote, of twinkly guitar intonations, brilliantly placed drumming, and these beautiful dreamscape kind of vocals, which just sort of, they kind of sit in the mix like a bit of a, it all feels very airy and beautiful. It's fantastically written. It's got some brilliant story writing, a cool narrative, and some great imagery behind it as well. It just feels different. It feels fresh. And I can't tell you enough how good that vocal delivery is from Rose, who being local from Cardiff before, I'm not sure I've heard her in a band before, but she's been keeping that locked away and ready for this project, and it just suits her down to the ground. There's this amazing sort of quality to her voice that is so genuine and so light. You could almost hear if she hit a wrong note, but she never would. There's a real effortless nature to the way that she sings, and it's so easy to get behind. It's so easy to kind of feel that emotional depth. It's a cracking second single. That band are brimming with talent, and I just can't wait to see what happens next. Look out for that. That's a really, really cool release. Adam this week wrote about the return of 100 Reasons. They're back with their new single Glorious Sunset, and points out that it's actually been 20 years since their debut, Ideas Above Our Station, an album which set them on a path to semi-success and an everlasting cult fan base. After album number 4 in 2007, the band spluttered to a halt, only returning every few years for the odd live show. But the announcement of new music has come with a bit of a rumble, and they've now dropped their new single, the title track from their upcoming album, Glorious Sunset. It's kind of everything a 100 Reasons fan would want or expect from the band at this point. They are obviously not out of touch. It's just as punchy, it's just as big, it's just as distinctive vocally as you'd expect or that you'd want, and comes with that emotional depth in their lyrics. It talks about the loss of a loved one, so they're obviously not dialing back on that emotional front, bringing with it some emotional weight as well. New material can only mean one thing, and that probably means they might be in a town near you very, very soon, which is a very, very exciting concept. So keep an eye out for that too. A band that we're absolutely raving about at the moment in Noizze is Forlorn. They've just dropped a single called Hold Me. The song talks about codependency and is written as a letter from a parent to a child. It's heavy in all senses of the word, both sonically and lyrically and vocally. There's howls from vocalist Megan Elliott that open the song before guitars then come in with a crushing weight. It isn't entirely as in your face as you'd think. Will talks about it being very heavy at times, but this can be sometimes subdued, both in verses and through melodic vocals that come in throughout, akin to the likes of Devil Sold His Soul or Rolo Tomasi, but also just incredibly fucking cool, and a really cool addition to an ever-growing roster of amazing alternative extreme bands that seem to be coming out of left, right and centre at the moment in terms of our music scene. Another great addition. This is really cool to be able to say, but Bob Vylan are back with their new song Delicate Nature. It features Laurie, Vincent of the UK duo Slaves, and it's only 6 months after they released their sophomore album, so quids in for Bob Vylan fans, right? I myself first discovered Bob Vylan when I did the Kick-a-Peach episode with Elliot on this podcast, and they feature on the band's latest album, and there was a certain tenacity and ferocity and general just anger that they harnessed that was instantly relatable. It was no wonder that they were on that Kick-a-Peach album, because they are probably the other artist I'd say harnessed that similar sort of tenacity. Noizze newcomer Josiah wrote about the album this week in New Noizze and talks about the fact that there's all of the punch that you'd expect from Bob Vylan's music, and the heart of their artistry lies in their flow. Talks about social injustice, as always, but it also adds a touching reflection on life's fragility to their discography. Described as the musical equivalent of a gut punch and an attempt at waking up the ignorant, the apathetic, and the jaded. It very much seems like Bob Vylan are back, and they're just as pissed off as they've always been. friends of the podcast, friends of the website in general, our good friends Treehouse are back with a new gloomy green aesthetic and the drop of a double single. Is that double single or two singles? Anyway, there's new Treehouse music, so that's all I'm trying to say. There's two new tracks. There is 444 or 444. Who knows? Let us know, Treehouse. And library book stamps. Dan Hillier, our resident guy, the big man himself, wrote about the tracks this week in New Noizze and talked about whilst 444 is a brilliant continuation of the violence and sorrow of their 2020 EP Nurture, which, by the way, is an absolute banger. My review's out there somewhere of that EP, and it absolutely slaps. But it talks about an additional polish and a hardcore facing direction, and I know that when we spoke to the band previously, they talked about it getting a bit heavier, about mixing things up. If you're a fan of Treehouse, you'll know that they've never really stayed in one place. They've always been good at genre melding and bringing in different kind of elements to their music that just feel kind of right in the moment. They've never been held back by that and have always been quite creative. And if you talk to them, they're like that as human beings as well. So it's really cool that hasn't seen them kind of rein it in on this release, and they've just dialed it up almost. Meanwhile, library book stamps, Dan talks about it being a more melodic and delicate affair with a more classic post-hardcore tendency that can be found in the modern sound and in what bands are doing now. The band have always been quite open about being, an emo, sadcore kind of band. They've really bigged that up, but they hold a lot of classic tendencies in their music that are really, really cool, and they're not dictated by the way that bands seem to be going nowadays, or fitting in, or trying to get into a certain sort of brand. They really are one of a kind, and we are, as always, their biggest cheerleaders. They appeared at Power Festival this year on our stage, and it was so cool. They were one of the coolest performances of the day. It was sick to see them. I'm sure we'll see them again soon. They're going to do really big things with this, so we will carry on being their cheerleaders. Big up Treehouse. And lastly, my attempt at a roundup of the remaining songs and artists and bands that we've been raving about. Without giving away the full list, obviously, you have to go to noizze.co.uk for that. Anyway, Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes are back. It's only been a hot second since they last dropped their collaboration, The Drugs, with Jamie T, but they've got their new single out, Parasite, which is just as awesome as you'd hope it'd be. They don't really miss, and this song does not do that either. They've announced a 3-night residency at the Underworld in London, and that is going to be really, really fucking cool. Catching that band in any venue that's small, I fear for lives in the Underworld by day 3. If you're one of those crazy people, and I know there's going to be someone out there that tries to do all 3 nights, please be careful, I'll pray for you, is what I'm saying. I'll pray for you. The new song Parasite's an absolute banger. Check that out. 2 big shout outs that I missed in the last few weeks that I really, really want to shout out on here. Our good friends Satanic Tico have dropped another single. Yes, you heard that right if you don't already know who they are. Satanic Tico. And if you're thinking, oh wow, that's, a death metal band, a band that are, saying about tea, but don't do tea, well, you're in luck, because they do a huge amount of tea, and I actually have some of that tea. More on that in the coming weeks. But they've dropped a new song about tea, it would seem. It's called Human Tea, and it features, I'm going to butcher this, but Matt McGahey and Cryptopsy. It's as ruthless as you would imagine. It's as insane as you would imagine. And it's an absolute banger. And the second band that I missed but really, really wanted to shout out is our good friends in Beyond Extinction. They dropped a really fucking heavy track, actually. It's called Eyes of God, Look Down Upon Me. I mean, how fucking cool is that for a title for a song? It was released the middle of last month, but it is the deathcoreiest of deathcore that you'll have heard in quite some time. It is, again, an absolute banger. It's heavy as fuck. The band are really big up-and-comers. You'll have heard their names come up in the extreme music scene quite a lot. They're prolific, they're really hard-working, and they're really easy to get behind. Yes, I'm a little bit biased, but hey, that's just me. And they're worth the shout-out. They have a gig coming up with good mates in Monasteries as well, in Southampton, I believe, and that is going to be one very sweaty room. So check that out. It is a really, really good song. If you weren't aware, Matt Heafy himself has dropped a cover of Life is a Highway, and I kind of feel that's pretty much all I need to say about that. But you have to check it out to believe it. And he's covered more insane songs and just has a way of making a very epic metal cover. So check it out. It's as ridiculous and amazing as you'd hope. Papa Heath is heathing it up. So definitely check that out. August Burns Red are back with a new song called Ancestry, and that features Jesse Leach. So that's just as awesome as you'd imagine it would be. I talked about them on the last New Noise, but Pigs, that's 7 pigs or pigs times 7, are also back with a new song called Mr. Medicine. And we have more write-ups about new Suicide Silence, new Sleemo, new Temps, and way more. I think there was 15 tracks on this week's New Noise, which is, in and of itself, absolutely ridiculous. And before I finish up, as I am recording this, the Download Festival announcement has dropped. And this is not what this podcast is for at all, but holy shit, if you've seen that lineup by now, that is absolutely insane. You've got Metallica for 2 days. You have got the return of the Blackout, which is as insane as you can imagine it would be. Finally, someone listened and Bring Me the Horizon are headlining a stage. Slipknot are there, and then you've got some incredible artists. There's Ghost, Alexis on Fire, Architects, Disturbed, Parkway, Simple Plan, Pendulum. I would love to see Pendulum. And some amazing up-and-comers as well. There's Hawks, there's Lorna Shore, there's Witch Fever, 3 Days Grace, Stray from the Path, even Taylor Acorn, who's massive on TikTok. That, I'm looking at it as we speak, and that is a hell of a lineup. That's some really cool artists, man. That is going to be absolutely ridiculous, and that is going to be spoken about for years to come. That, I would argue, is one of the best download announcements in quite some time. Holy shit, and what a way to sign off this podcast. And that's it for New Noise this week. If you have already dropped us a like, subscribe, shared, commented, or spoken to me, you're an incredible human being. And if you haven't, then, well, what are you doing? Please do. It means a lot and it goes a long way. We are at Noise Podcast Network on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find at Noise UK is our handle for social media for our normal website as well. Don't forget that you can find the Essential playlist on Spotify. Don't forget that you can find the full feature that this New Noise podcast is based on over on the website as well. And I'll see you next week for more New Noise. In the meantime, stay noisy.